2018, Silicon Valley, California. In the third basement of his private museum, the powerful deep learning algorithms of billionaire Adrian Brin are about to achieve their objective: the decryption of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. At the beginning of the 19th century, while the Egyptian campaign is turning into a fiasco, the French scientists overlook the Rosetta Stone. During the 2 centuries that follow, Egypt's antique monuments are at the mercy of looters, and private collections are enriched at the detriment of national museums. Today, having paid the highest price on the black market for the precious stone, the billionaire is about to make history. But none of that ever happened. In 1799, a small grain of providential sand will allow us to pierce the secret of the hieroglyphics. July 21st, 1798, Battle of the Pyramids. General Bonaparte just conquered Egypt. July 15th, 1799, Lieutenant Bouchard accidentally discovers an impressive Egyptian stone. September 14th, 1822, Jean-François Champollion manages to unlock the mystery of hieroglyphics. These 3 inextricably linked events are key moments in the decoding of hieroglyphics, opening the path to Egyptology. December 23rd, 1790, Figeac, France. Jean-François Champollion is born in a troubled political context. The previous year, in Paris, armed revolutionists stormed the Bastille. Following that, France enters a period of revolution. The European monarchs unite in an effort to squash the dangerous ideas of liberty and equality. The young republic is fighting on all fronts in the context of total chaos. Time passes, and while little Champollion is learning to read at a very young age, governments fall one after the other. The revolutionary terror hovers over the countryside, and the guillotine prunes the political landscape. England, leader of successive anti-revolutionary coalitions, is the national enemy. But it is protected by the Channel. The island is beyond the reach of the revolutionary armies. So they find a different path. An invasion of Egypt could compromise the route to India and threaten British trade interests. At this time, Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire, but the Sublime Porte, riddled with corruption, could only exercise theoretical control. The real power was in the hands of the Mamluks. Crossing the Mediterranean, controlled by the Royal Navy, is a complicated endeavor. To lead this dangerous mission, they chose an officer who has quickly risen through the ranks, General Bonaparte. Young, dynamic, and aggressive, Bonaparte is convinced by the ideas of the revolution and completely dedicated to his country. In record time and completely in secret, Bonaparte manages to assemble an army of 40,000 soldiers. And that's not all. Passionate about math and a personal member of the Institute of Sciences, he asks the eminent mathematician Gaspard Monge to organize a commission of scientists and artists to accompany him to Egypt. Beyond the military considerations, this will be a scientific and cultural expedition. In total, no less than 167 savants join the adventure without knowing how long it would take or exactly where they would go. May 19, 1798, mathematicians, chemists, surveyors, doctors, architects, painters, and botanists set out side by side with the revolutionary troops for the land of the pharaohs.
Welcome to the memory of humanity. Every historical event, regardless of how small, is recorded and connected. You only need to change one to upset all the others. Here, we are able to control time, analyze and compare billions of events in order to rewrite history in infinite ways. Let's go back to the dawn of the 19th century. No one, not even in Egypt, is able to decipher the innumerable texts carved in the tombs of the pharaohs or on the obelisks that guard the entrance to the temples. The Egyptians know almost nothing about their extensive ancient heritage. Egyptian civilization, from the height of its millennia of existence, has almost disappeared from memory. From Easter Island to the Central American empires to the Celts, there are significant parts of history that remain mysterious even today. Others have disappeared forever, and their very existence has been forgotten. This makes one pause for thought. No matter how strong and enduring a society might be, a shift in the winds of fate can still make it disappear forever. On the scale of humankind, civilizations are fragile and awfully ephemeral. None of them are safe from oblivion.
November 1798. Jean-François Champollion enters school. This strong-willed young student prefers Latin and Greek lessons and turns his back on math classes. This is just one of the first steps in the long love affair between Champollion and ancient languages. A few months earlier, hundreds of nautical miles from there, General Bonaparte managed to evade the English lookouts and seized the city of Alexandria. July 21st, on the banks of the River Nile, he defeated the Mamluk troops of Murad Bey. During an epic battle, not far from the Great Pyramids of Giza, the French soldiers opened the road to Cairo by firing their pistols. Within a few months, General Bonaparte conquers Egypt. From then on, the Scientific Commission explores every inch of the country. The Egyptian Institute, newly created in Cairo, methodically inventories everything found within the country and lays the first stones of Egyptology. But the pressure from the British fleet is growing stronger and stronger. On August 1st, the Admiral Nelson's squadron destroyed the French fleet in the harbor of Abu Qir, destroying all hopes of returning to France. Bonaparte is at an impasse. He is forced to remain in Egypt. Consequently, he commands his men to restore coastal fortifications in places like the city El Rashid, renamed Rosette in French. July 15, 1799. While working, Lieutenant Bouchard's men dislodge a heavy black stone. The stone, which was intended as building material, immediately intrigues the lieutenant. Polytechnician and reader of ancient Greek, the officer immediately understands the importance of the discovery. Under a layer of dust, he identifies some Greek inscriptions. But the stone has two others, carved using different systems of writing. The lieutenant alerts his superiors. Quickly sent to Cairo, the stone, from then on called the Rosetta Stone, is the object of everyone's attention. In addition to Greek, the two other writing systems are identified. The stone contains demotic and hieroglyphic symbols. What is even more important, the Greek text, quickly deciphered, indicates that the three texts are, in fact, the translations of the same decree. The key to unlock the secret of the pharaoh's sacred writings. To facilitate its study, they decide to make a copy of the texts in case the stone falls into the hands of the English.
We have arrived at a point of divergence. A point of divergence is a key moment, a crossroads in our history where our world can swing from one side to the other. The Rosetta Stone is a stele fragment engraved with a decree promulgated by Pharaoh Ptolemy V in 196 BC. The same text was transcribed 3 times, in hieroglyphics at the top, in Demotic in the center, and in Greek at the bottom. In theory, understanding the content of one text allows one to decipher the content of the two others. The stone was discovered by an educated officer who could actually read Greek. This unique occasion fell into the hands of one of the rare people who was capable of understanding its importance. As Louis Pasteur once said, chance only favors the prepared minds. Someone without in-depth knowledge of the ancient languages would probably have used that block of stone as backfill without anyone ever knowing it existed. Without the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, it is possible that Egyptology would have never become so popular. Today, Egyptian history would probably still be largely ignored or neglected. Falling victim to looting by treasure hunters, the Egyptian heritage would be scattered amongst private collections all around the globe.
March 1801. Champollion, 10 years old, joins his brother in Grenoble. He begins studying ancient Greek and Latin, as well as Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, and Chaldean, then moves on to Persian and Coptic. Archaeology is his passion. In 1804, he studies at the Imperial High School. Since the Republic has become an empire, France has a new leader, Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. 5 years earlier, evading the maritime patrols of the Royal Navy, the General of the Republic fled from Egypt. November 10, 1799, he positions himself at the head of the country through an audacious military coup. Thanks to savvy messaging, his scientific triumphs overshadow the failure of his military campaign in Egypt. But the repatriation of the Scientific Commission, loaded down by its numerous documents, notes, sketches, and Egyptian artifacts, is not achieved without a compromise. The English fleet offers its safe return in exchange for all the scientific works. A terrible sacrifice. After tough negotiations, the French are allowed to keep their precious research. But the British draw the line at the most attractive archaeological finds, especially the Rosetta Stone. This is an immeasurable loss. But inside the bags of the French scholars, the copies of the stone have been happily preserved, alongside Denon's fabulous drawings and other meticulous descriptions of Egypt. From 1802 to 1826, these precious items are patiently reassembled in a monumental work, the Description of Egypt. The Rosetta Stone immediately attracts the attention of the scientific community, especially that of the Englishman Thomas Young. The scientist immediately gets to work. His goal: make the stone speak and unlock the secrets of the hieroglyphics. In 1808, one of the copies of the stone falls into the hands of the 17-year-old Champollion. In 1814, he writes to the Royal Society asking for a better transcription. Thomas Young, then secretary of the prestigious organization, discovers he has a competitor in France. The response from Young to Champollion is clear. The French transcriptions have the same quality as the English ones, so there's no need to send anything. Soon, Champollion hears about Young's research. He has a rival in London.
One writing can be hiding another. When the Rosetta Stone was discovered, the comprehension of Egyptian hieroglyphics had been lost since the end of the Roman Empire, even though it had previously been used for over 3 millennia. Reserved for scribes, a small official caste, the secrets of hieroglyphic writing was only known to a handful of people. In 391, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I condemned the sacred signs to oblivion when he ordered the closing of the pagan temples. Hieroglyphic writing, designed to be carved, is mainly figurative, easily recognizable by its symbols representing objects. Over time, it is simplified, tending towards abstraction. It becomes progressively linear, then cursive, so it can be inscribed more quickly on parchment or papyrus. The writing becomes even more simplified with Demotic, which is a popular writing used in daily life, a far cry from its hieroglyphic ancestry. Finally, Coptic appears, which is based on the Greek alphabet and still used today as a liturgical language. In Champollion's time, the Egyptians use another language, Arabic. For researchers, deciphering hieroglyphics means traveling through time across various linguistic layers. A true archaeological feat. Knowing the intermediary languages becomes a huge advantage.
Young makes the first notable advances. He suggests that Demotic is not simply alphabetic, but a mixture between hieroglyphics and an alphabet. Thanks to the discoveries of other researchers, he also knows that the cartouche with multiple hieroglyphics actually contained the names of the pharaohs. His mathematical method pushes him to dismiss the signs he deems unnecessary. Young seems to be a step ahead. June 18th, 1815, Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon's army, after fighting alone against all of Europe, is vanquished by a coalition led by England. Napoleon abdicates a few days later. Champollion, a supporter of the emperor, is placed under surveillance. In March 1816, he is forced to leave the city and has to stop his research for 1 year. Young continues the race all alone. The Englishman publishes an article in the Encyclopedia Britannica. It claims to have discovered the principles of hieroglyphic writing. But in reality, he can successfully identify the name of Pharaoh Ptolemy, thanks to cross-checks, but he is still unable to read the hieroglyphics. He has not found the deciphering key. Champollion is going to go much further. The Frenchman is persuaded that within the same phrase, a sign can be used as a symbol to designate a word or phonetically to designate a sound. According to him, hieroglyphics are a mixture of ideograms and phonograms. Added to the block containing the names of known pharaohs, this major discovery will help him isolate 12 phonetic signs. It is the beginning. On the morning of September 14th, 1822, he receives a reproduction of a cartouche from one of the temples of Abu Simbel. He begins studying it immediately. Thanks to his previous work, he already knows the two last signs, a double S. Following his theory, the first sign, very widespread and representative of the sun, could be read as the symbol of the god of the sun, or by his phonetic equivalent in Coptic, Ra. The sign in the middle is also decipherable thanks to his precious knowledge of Coptic, an advantage that Young lacked. It reads, "Bring to the world," which is pronounced mice or mis. Combined, this reveals Ramesses, or phonetically speaking, Ramses, which signifies Ra is the one who bore him. For the first time in 1,400 years, on that day in 1822, someone is able to read the name of a powerful pharaoh using hieroglyphic symbols. The legend says that Champollion arrived at his brother's house and screamed, "I've got it," and then passed out from exhaustion. A few days later, he details his discovery in a letter to the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres. Thomas Young is offended that he is only mentioned twice in the publication by Champollion, a young, pretentious Frenchman who is 17 years younger than him. In an anonymous letter, he describes Champollion's work as an extension of his own.
Making history. Thomas Young after putting both his reputation and a great deal of energy into the fight, is finally bested by a young French scholar. Vexed, Young redoubles his efforts to make his work known, arguing that Champollion's discovery is largely based on it. One fact is obvious. All scientific research is based on the sum of knowledge accumulated by others. In 1809, after the long process of classifying all the vertebrate species, the French naturalist Lamarck proposed a theory around the evolution of species. It is based, in part, on principles already developed by Aristotle. 50 years later, Charles Darwin completes this theory by adding the notion of natural selection. In 1859, he publishes On the Origin of Species, a major scientific work and a foundation text explaining the principles of evolution. Today, everyone knows the name Darwin. But how much of his fame is owed to Lamarck?
1826. Champollion is named curator in charge of the Egyptian collections at the Louvre Museum. It is a huge honor. Enriching the collections becomes Champollion's priority. In 1828, Champollion finally realizes his dream. He takes his first steps on Egyptian sands for a scientific mission. He goes up the Nile until the Second Cataract, personally verifying the validity of his work. After being satisfied for years with copies and reproductions, he finally has multiple examples of hieroglyphics engraved or painted on temples, statues, sarcophagi, papyrus. When he returns in 1830, he is elected to the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres, then obtains the first chair of Egyptian archaeology in the world, created specially for him at the Collège de France. He gives his inaugural lecture in 1831, but sickness takes him from the world on March 4th, 1832. He was only 41 years old. He never saw the Rosetta Stone in person. But he accomplished his goals. Entered in the history of humankind as the decipherer of hieroglyphics, this young scholar who was passionate about the Orient opened up the path to Egyptology. It's thanks to him that today we know so much about the 3,500 years of ancient Egyptian history. And yet, there are still so many mysteries to be discovered. But that is another story.
Who is legitimate? In 2004, the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Cairo sent a request to the British Museum. Found on Egyptian soil and illegally transported to England, the Rosetta Stone should be returned. For the London Museum, which had protected it for over 2 centuries, the stone has become an integral part of the British heritage. The question of restitution for numerous objects, sometimes aligned with colonial domination or military operations, can be complex. Before any other consideration, these vestiges of the past should be protected against time, the elements, and above all else, from humans. The sacking of churches and castles during the French Revolution, or the destruction of the temples of Palmyra by ISIS in 2015, remind us that the heritage of humanity is fragile. Added to this is the less visible but equally destructive black market for antiquities. All countries are victims and actors in this. The Rosetta Stone has taught us that each ruin can hide an immeasurable secret. Champollion worked for years on the flawed reproduction of this stone. The original was inaccessible because it was situated in a country in conflict with his own. Today, a simple research online allows us to see high-definition photos of it. The British Museum in London, where it resides, offers free access to the public. For everyone, it is now available, without restrictions.